My name is Elizabeth Manns, and I'd like to welcome you to the April 4th Coalition Show. This is going to be a pre-taped show as we have a conflict on Monday, so we agreed to come in and tape the show early. So it will, however, be the November 21st, 2022 edition. It is week 425 since the closing of the North Adams Regional Hospital. The April 4th Coalition's mission statement is, we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights and are against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. We support all the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but as is our custom, we put the emphasis on Article 23 at the start of the show.
Article 23, Section 1, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment. Number 2, everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work.
Number 3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration/compensation, ensuring for himself or herself and his or her family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented if necessary by other means of social protection. Number 4, everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of her or his interests. And as is our custom, we give a shout out to Michael Putnam to say thank you for airing our audio portion on Friday nights at 6 p.m. on WMNB LP 107.1, and to our producer, Dave Fabiano, for staying late every time we need to come in. As I said, we're pre-taping this show in advance of the 11/21 date, so we have the advantage of showing something fresh and new that just happened.
Just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
That too,
we're taping this a week away from Thanksgiving, but and I guess I'm pretty thankful for having had Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Some people testified that she was probably
one of the
greatest Speaker of the House in the history.
Right, and certainly one of the most effective. If nothing else. She knew how to do the. She learned how to do the job.
Votes.
She could count the votes, and she could get the people to vote.
She knew when to bring it before. You know, she went in the speech before we're going to put it on. She talked about, how she worked with President Bush on getting things for the environment, and then she worked with Obama with the health care, with Obamacare, and then she worked with President Joe Biden with the infrastructure bill and all that came forward. And she stood up for the Constitution. So I think we, out of respect for her, we're going to show a few minutes of her speech to the floor this afternoon on Thursday, the
November
17th.
Scripture teaches us that for everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. My friends, no matter what title you all, my colleagues, have bestowed upon me, speaker, leader, whip, there is no greater official honor for me than to stand on this floor and to speak for the people of San Francisco. This I will continue to do as a member of the House, speaking for the people of San Francisco, serving the great state of California, and defending our Constitution. And with great confidence in our caucus, I will not seek re-election to Democratic leadership in the next Congress. For me, the hour's come for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus that I so deeply respect. And I'm grateful that so many are ready and willing to shoulder this awesome responsibility. Madam Speaker, standing here today, I'm endlessly grateful for all of life's blessings. For my Democratic colleagues whose courage and commitment with the support of your families have made many of these accomplishments possible. In fact, could not have been done without you. For my dear husband, Paul, who has been my beloved partner in life and my pillar of support, thank you. We're all grateful for all the prayers and well wishes as he continues his recovery. Thank you so much. For our darling children, Nancy, Corinne, Christine, Jacqueline, Paul, and Alexandra, and our grandchildren, Alexander and Madeline, Liam, Sean, and Ryan, Paul and Thomas, Bella and Octavio, they are the joys of our lives for whom and we are so very, very proud of them and a comfort to us at this time. And for my brilliant, dedicated, and patriotic staff, under the leadership of Terry McCullough, working together, the finest group of public servants the House has ever known. Thank you all so much. And again, for those who sent me here, for the people of San Francisco, for entrusting me with the high honor of being their voice in Congress. In this continued work, I will strive to honor the call of the patron saint of our city, St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. In this house, we...
Okay, we're going to stop it there.
Okay.
And we'll just have to...
We should say thank you for Nancy for all her years of service.
Yes.
They could not have been easy. Many of them were not easy, and trying, and that is an example of grace in leaving and knowing when to let go of power.
Yes. Yeah. I just, I think she's setting an example. She said it at her last election to be speaker that she
would step down.
She would step down after this term, and a lot of people weren't sure that she would actually do that. Because there's a lot of power. She's third in line as speaker.
Yes, she was. Yes.
Yeah, but now she would be in the minority as the minority leader because the Republicans have taken the House by a small number of votes.
Right, and so but I think I honestly think had it gone either way, she was going to step down. But she wanted to be there to be a source of advice.
Right, and she's and Steny Hoyer and the
Jim Clyburn.
And both said that they were going to step back too, and it'll probably be Hakeem Jeffries from Brooklyn that will be the minority leader. So I just wanted the news of that. I think that we came out very positively in this election.
We did.
And we're going to continue to move forward. But we're coming on to Thanksgiving, and one thing that that we've been running up against is a lot of refugees all over the world with global warming. It's going to continue.
Yes.
We might sometime
be a refugee
if we have to move to another area due to some certain weather
condition. Right.
So.
Anytime you have to vacate your home because of a hurricane or a tornado, you're a refugee.
Right.
We just don't call them that here.
Yeah. Well, all over the world are being affected by this climate change, the climate catastrophe. But Article 14 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. This right may not be invoked in the case of prosecutions generally arising from non-political crimes or acts contrary to the purposes of the principles of the United Nations. But people are guaranteed that right. And now we're going to look at a man named Safi Raoul, who was a refugee, and he has an amazing story. He has a TED Talk that we're going to show 10 minutes of, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit more about it.
All right. Sounds good.
It's 8:15 p.m. in Afghanistan right now. And at this time, 10 days ago, I was sitting in an 8-foot by 8-foot cell in the basement of a maximum security prison in Kabul, where I was being held captive by the Taliban. I'd been in that cell for 104 days, and yet I was one of the lucky ones. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the beginning. This is me. I'm 5 years old and living in an Afghan refugee camp in Peshawar, Pakistan. You can see the two patches on my UNHCR-donated jeans. One patch is an American flag, and the other is the Statue of Liberty, the quintessential beacons of the American dream I so badly wanted. But as a refugee, I didn't have a state to call home. And not having a state, I didn't have rights. And not having rights, I didn't have a voice. I needed someone to advocate for me. And I was fortunate to have two advocates. My parents, who had immigrated to the US 4 years ahead of me, fought tirelessly to get me to America for those 4 years. They gave me a voice. They gave me the American dream. And my parents' advocacy allowed me to join them, to immigrate to Omaha, Nebraska, to go to high school in the state, to serve in the military, to graduate as a Tillman Scholar from Georgetown University, and to get accepted into medical school. I became the American dream. And in my dream, everything came full circle. This past summer, I deferred one dream for another when I put medical school on hold, founded Human First Coalition, an organization dedicated to aiding Afghans in need. Having spent the first 17 years of my life stateless, I rather abruptly found myself in the role of the humanitarian aid worker who had shaped so much of my life. I became that advocate and that voice for others. In becoming an aid worker, I got to provide food, medical care, and shelter for thousands of Afghans. I got to operate resettlement flights for thousands more, and I got to make multiple trips to Kabul with the Taliban's blessing to oversee it all. But then on December 18, 2021, everything changed. That morning, which started off like any other morning, I was suddenly, inexplicably, and unexpectedly taken into Taliban custody. As I was being driven to the Taliban's General Directorate of Intelligence headquarters, I was told that I just needed to answer a few routine questions, and then I'd be sent back to my hotel. Instead, a few hours later, I was brought into that basement room, 3 roommates, no blanket, no mattress, no pillow, no sun, no way to communicate with the outside world, and no clue what was to become of me. And from that moment on, I stayed in that basement in the dead of the Afghan winter for 105 days. The entire time, I feared that I might be taken in front of a firing squad at any minute. And on 45th day, I was beaten and tortured by 11 men wielding pipes after 8 days on hunger strike. I had done nothing wrong. But again, I was lucky. I not only had several exceptional advocates, but I had a state. The US government gave me a voice and asserted my human rights, and that voice ultimately led to my release 10 days ago. And on the day of my release, following a 4-hour flight from Kabul to Qatar, the euphoria I felt as I walked off that plane is indescribable. But amidst the triumph and joy of homecoming, something was amiss. On the day of my release, I returned to society to find that humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan was only getting worse. The whole world was fixated on Ukraine, and nearly every Afghan resettlement effort was on pause or had grounded to a screeching halt with no effective resolution in sight. And that was a huge letdown. And that is why I decided that before even visiting my family, I had to get back to work. Because the truth of the matter is 95% of Afghans are currently not getting enough to eat. 22.8 million are facing crisis levels of hunger. 97% are living below the poverty line, and 9 million are living in extreme poverty. And these are the individuals who fought alongside us and the international coalition for the last 20 years. They are our allies, they are our brothers and sisters, and they are in desperate straits. The magnitude of the work ahead is staggering. But we have to start somewhere. And the question becomes, what should we do? In my mind, 4 things. First, we must bolster humanitarian aid provisions for the international community by increasing support for and donations to grassroots organizations that have infrastructure to ensure that aid is getting directly into the hands of the people who need it the most. And that's just not my organization. There are so many support-worthy groups doing exceptional work in Afghanistan, and we need resources now. Second, we government and citizens of the 36 countries who fought in Afghanistan must keep our promises to our Afghan allies, to whom we owe a debt by fast-tracking their resettlement, be it in the United States or elsewhere. This first and foremost necessitates resettling refugees who are currently waiting in camps around the world to reach a place that they can call home. It also calls upon the international community to increase quotas for Afghan allies, to accept more at-risk Afghans for permanent resettlement, and to expand programs like humanitarian parole to generate more pathways for those in need. Third, as we find pathways forward for these individuals, we must not separate families. We must preserve them. Or at the very least, create strict limits for the amount of time that families can be separated from. Family separation like mine generate irreparable harm. But clear and specific change to existing admission policies can ensure that other minors do not face the same fate that befell me and my family. Fourth, and this is the most important of them all, we must reestablish an international diplomatic presence in Afghanistan to hold Taliban accountable for their actions and provide consular services to the people. It opens channel to address Taliban's actions rather than cutting off, isolating, and eliminating avenues for influence. And I've witnessed what engagement with the Taliban can look like firsthand. The negotiations that resulted in my release from captivities were the direct result of effective diplomacy with the Taliban on the world stage. Diplomats spoke to each other openly and resolved an issue of mutual concern. And while the success of this discussion is perhaps an anomaly, the kind of diplomacy demonstrated by my release can and should serve as a model for achieving other desired change for the future of Afghanistan, such as the restoration of girls' education, above grade 6 freedom of press, bolstering women's rights, and most urgently, increasing humanitarian assistance. At the same time, our diplomacy can't be a blank check. The Taliban must live up to their end of the bargain to demonstrate that they are ready to engage in diplomacy as an actor that upholds basic human rights, that ensure necessary freedoms, and that does not take or hold hostages. At the end of the day, the situation in Afghanistan is an extremely complex one. It can't be summed up in an 8-minute talk I wrote 4 days ago, Emerging from Captivity. Yet there are tangible solutions, and I'm in the privileged position of being able to advocate for them, but I'm here today to tell you that you are too. The truth of the matter is, especially in the case of Afghanistan, change has always and will continue to start with everyday people. This fall, tens of thousands of people from around the world banded together at the grassroots level to aid Afghans in need. You don't need to be an expert to engage, to volunteer, to contribute, to lobby, or to even simply welcome a refugee to advocate for them. As Margaret Mead once said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. On the afternoon of my release 10 days ago, I, at long last, climbed out of my basement cell and into the sunlight without anything binding my hands or covering my eyes. I could see the sky. I traveled out of the prison through Kabul City in Corolla sedan. I passed the American Embassy and arrived at Kabul International Airport. I walked onto the tarmac. I climbed into the C-17. I shook hands with American, Qatari, and British diplomats. And suddenly, I was a free man again. But again, I was one of the lucky ones. Ultimately, being a captive reminded me of a time when I was helpless and needed a voice. Now that I'm released, I have my voice back, and mercifully, it puts me in a position where I can advocate for that little boy with the Statue of Liberty patch on his UNHCR-donated jeans, chasing the American dream. I hope you'll join me.
Boy, that's quite a story.
It is quite a story. And he's, how do I phrase this? I don't get it. And I'm sure in his mind he doesn't even think he's anything special or spectacular. I'm sure he doesn't, he thinks he's just doing the work in front that needs to be done. And he's right. He is doing work that needs to be done, and everyone can do that work if they want to. And the hard part in our society right now is we're splintered in so many directions with so many crises. It's hard to pick which one you're going to focus on or which one is the important one for you. But I think you have to choose so that you can focus on one.
During this time of Thanksgiving, this Thanksgiving holiday season, you know, we do have to be grateful for everything we have. And there's so many children in the world that need that aid. And he made a point when he said that we could contribute. That was his number one point he was asking for, is to contribute and send aid to non-governmental organizations that are serving people directly in Afghanistan. Not just send money to Afghanistan, because he said a lot of times that food doesn't get to the people. It's taken by the army and it's used by the Taliban for its own purposes. So he encouraged us to do that. He also talked about resettlement. And I first came across him by listening. My daughter called me and said, "Dad, you got to listen to the podcast with Jon Stewart." And Jon Stewart interviewed him, and it's an amazing interview. If you can go to Jon Stewart's podcast, I don't know if we'll have time to show a little bit of it, but in that he talks, you know, Jon Stewart considered him to be like James Bond. He said they're looking for a new James Bond. He couldn't believe everything that this young man has done in his life already. But in his talk on that show, he talked about resettlement. And he said that, and as we heard him to say, that since the war in Ukraine has taken place, that the refugees in Afghanistan have sort of taken a back seat. And there's, you know, he talked about in order to apply for asylum, the cost is, you know, there's a set cost, and it's almost as much as a year's wages for someone in that country at this time. And what happened in I'm sorry, I keep thinking Ukraine, yeah. In Ukraine, what the State Department did is they waived those charges. So those people could seek the asylum right away.
They're in a war as opposed to being, you know.
Well, these guys were in a war.
We're in a war as well for 20 years. Yes,
Yeah,
they were in a war zone.
Their lives are in danger because they were helping the United States.
Right, and so you would think we could waive fees
He wants us to move forward towards resettlement. He said, do not separate families, because that's what happened to him. He was a victim of that. And we've had that on our own border.
With Mexico, yes, New Mexico, Venezuelans,
with the refugees coming in over the border. The Trump administration had separated families, put people in cages, you know. He was an advocate that don't separate families. And then the third is reestablish diplomatic relations with Afghanistan so we can enter into a dialogue and make sure that they start respecting the human rights of the people of Afghanistan.
That's true, because if you isolation only causes suffering, and if the government, whoever's in charge, whoever has the power at that moment, doesn't care that the people are suffering, it doesn't do you any good.
Exactly.
Whereas talking is needed. You know, whereas communication may change minds
Yeah,
or change attitudes.
it's unfortunate. We don't want to see people starving all over the world.
No,
And
we don't.
so it's, you know, he was talking about working all he could do to make a difference in the world. And we had Nancy Pelosi, who was a mother, raised children, and went from being a housewife, and then she went to become Speaker of the House.
And she never envisioned it.
Yeah, she never envisioned it. But, individuals can do extraordinary things.
Yes, people make the difference, in whether individual or working in groups, but people make a difference. Politicians generally can't. I mean, governments can't. It's
Yeah.
just not their function.
We have to push them towards that.
Towards that.
I don't know. You think I should show part of?
You have 1 minute and 56 seconds.
I don't think we can. I don't
You
think
don't
we
think
can
you
do
can
that
do that?
in
Well,
that amount of time. But
I don't think so.
I just encourage you to go to the Jon Stewart's podcast and listen to him. He does some wonderful interviews on that.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to say listening to podcasts, I listened to Michael Moore today.
You did,
And
yes.
he was.
I know, Mike's one of
my
your
wife said, I
favorites.
never heard him so happy. He is on cloud nine. He said he predicted the fact that there was not going to be a red wave.
He did, yeah. I was reading that 2 weeks before, that he said it's not going to be a red wave. He didn't say that the Republicans weren't going to win the House. He just said it's not going to be what they're saying it is. Don't buy into it. And generally, I've stopped listening to pollsters for the most part, for that reason.
He said, why do we still listen to polls? He said it's like, he made some comparison, I can't remember what, some outdated thing that, we no longer use.
Right,
it's out, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work anymore because either people aren't honest in the polls, or the polls are now being warped to fit a purpose, as opposed to being honest reporting out of what people are saying.
More time should be spent on what are the candidates saying and how will it affect the lives of everyday Americans, rather than talking about polls.
Right.
It's just like a horse race rather than having actual ideas that we have to.
Correct, and people should pick a candidate who they believe is going to work for them, not for themselves.
Right. And
so we're coming up now just about to the closing, so again, we want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy what you have, and then get down to work.
Power to the people. We have to start moving forward.
Yep.
There's power in the factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in our union. Now the lessons of the past are all learned with workers' blood. Mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities and the farmlands to trenches